In the quiet village of Ajo, where everyone knew each other, one woman hid a secret so deadly it changed the fate of everyone she served. Behind her innocent eyes lies a dark truth that no one saw coming until it was too late. What happens when the quietest person in the room turns out to be the most dangerous? Watch now to uncover the chilling story of Nkiru. The air in the small village of Ajo felt heavy that day. For the villagers, Ajo had always been a peaceful place where everyone knew one another, and gossip, as small as it might be, could ripple through every home in no time. Ajo was a village built on tradition, respect, and shared values of community. The people were simple, but beneath the simplicity lay complex human relationships, and the village harbored secrets that were never spoken aloud. It was in this very village that a young woman named Nkiru grew up. Nkiru, though born into an average family, had lost both her parents at the tender age of 9. Life had not been kind to her after their passing. She was left in the care of an elderly aunt, a woman who was more concerned with her survival than with nurturing a child. As a result, Nkiru was sent out to work for different families as a housemaid from a very young age. Despite the harshness of her upbringing, Nkiru was a strikingly beautiful young woman. Her skin was the color of caramel, her almond-shaped eyes large and expressive, and her frame slender yet strong. But her beauty marked a deeper, more evil side, one that would soon earn her the reputation of being the most dangerous woman in the region. As the years passed, Nkiru worked for several families. She quickly learned the ways of the household she served, what to do, who to obey, and how to stay invincible when needed. But despite her outward obedience, there was a cold, calculating look in her eyes. Her mind was constantly ticking, analyzing and planning. Nkiru harbored deep-seated resentment for the families she worked for. She saw the wealth and privileges they enjoyed, while she had nothing. They had everything: love, comfort, and status, and yet they looked down on her, treating her as though she was insignificant, nothing more than the hired maid. Over time, these feelings of anger grew inside her, turning into something far more dangerous. It was the day she entered the Oba's household that things began to spiral into the darkness. Chief Oba was one of the wealthiest men in the village, known for his vast lands and successful businesses. His wife, Madam Chioma, was a woman of class and grace, always dressed in the finest fabrics and adored in gold jewelries. They had 3 children, 3 boys, who were just as privileged as one might expect. The Oba family hired Nkiru when she was only 16, fresh-faced and seemingly innocent. But she quickly won them over with her quiet attitude and hard-working nature. Madam Chioma took a particular liking to her, thinking of her as the daughter she never had. She often gave Iniru small presents, an old scarf here, a pair of shoes there. But no matter what was given, Iniru never felt grateful. Instead, she simmered with resentment. In her mind, these gifts were not acts of kindness, but reminders of her lowly position. Months passed, and Iniru's bitterness grew. She watched the Oba's family live their life of luxury, and it made her blood boil. They ate lavish meals while she picked at leftovers, and they wore expensive clothes while she scrubbed the floors. It was during one of these meals, as she stood in the background, watching the family laugh and enjoy their feasts, that the idea first came to her. It seemed almost too simple at first, but the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. She had access to their food, their water, their lives. All she had to do was slip a little something into their meals, and she could watch their world crumble before her eyes. And so she began to plan. Iniru was careful. She didn't want to draw attention to herself, so she started small. She visited the local herbalist under the guise of needing remedies for headaches and fatigue. The herbalist, an old woman known for her knowledge of herbs and other effects. Iniru listened carefully, asking questions that seemed innocent enough, but her mind was focused on one thing: finding the perfect poison. After weeks of careful observation and planning, she finally found what she needed: a rare herb that, when ground into powder, could be mixed into food and cause a slow, painful death. The symptoms would mimic a disease, making it difficult to trace back to her. The perfect weapon. The first victim was Chief Oba's youngest son, Chike. He was only 7, full of life and energy. Iniru slipped the poison into his food one evening while she served the family dinner. No one suspected a thing. Chike began to feel unwell within days, and the family grew concerned. Doctors were called, but no one could figure out what was wrong with him. Within a month, the boy was dead. The household was plunged into mourning, and Iniru watched with a cold detachment as they grieved. She felt no remorse. To her, Chike's death was just the beginning. After the tragedy at the Oba household, Iniru moved on to work for another prominent family in the village, the Okafors. The family, like the Obas, was wealthy and respected. They had 2 teenage daughters who were the pride of their parents. But Iniru only saw more people who flaunted their wealth and status in her face. The same pattern repeated itself. Iniru established herself into the household, playing the role of the quiet, obedient maid. But behind her soft-spoken exterior, she was plotting once again. This time, it was the eldest daughter, Ada, who became her target. Iniru had grown tired of the girl's constant bragging about her new clothes and jewelries. She hated the way Ada looked down on her, treating her like she was invincible. One evening, after the family had eaten dinner, Iniru poured a small amount of the poison into Ada's tea. The girl drank it without suspicion, and within days, she began to feel the effects, just like Chike. Ada's condition worsened rapidly, and soon she was bedridden. The Okafor family was devastated, but Nkiru remained calm and composed. When Ada died, the family was left shattered, and once again, no one suspected Nkiru. She moved on to the next family, and then the next, each time leaving a trail of death and despair behind her. As the death continued, the people of Ajo began to whisper. It seemed that every family Nkiru worked for suffered a tragedy. Children fell ill, parents grew weak, and no one could explain why. The villagers started to talk about curses, about evil spirits, and about the possibility that someone in the village was responsible for the death. But no one dared to point fingers at Nkiru. She was, after all, just a housemaid. However, as the body count grew, so did the suspicion. People began to avoid hiring Nkiru, and rumors spread. Some said she was cursed, while others claimed she was a witch. Nkiru, sensing the growing fear around her, decided it was time to leave the village. She packed her belongings and moved to a neighboring town where no one knew her name or her dark past. She found work with a new family, and for a while, it seemed like her deadly secret would remain hidden forever. In her new town, Nkiru began working for the Adeshola family, a wealthy and influential household with connection to the government. Unlike the previous families, the Adesholas had only one child, a son named Kola, who was 20 years old and studying at a prestigious university. Nkiru, as always, played the role of the perfect maid. She did her chores without complaints, never raised a voice, and blended into the background. But this time, something was different. For the first time, Nkiru felt a connection with someone in the household, Kola. Kola was unlike the spoiled, arrogant children she had encountered in the past. He was kind, intelligent, and treated Nkiru with a level of respect she had never experienced before. He often spoke to her, asking her about life, her dreams, and her thoughts. Nkiru found herself opening up to him in ways she had never done with anyone before. At first, Nkiru tried to fight the growing feelings she had for Kola. She knew that any relationship between them was impossible. She was just a maid, and he was the son of a powerful family. But the more time they spent together, the harder it became to resist. As Nkiru's feelings for Kola grew, so did her internal conflict. She had poisoned so many families, taken so many lives, and yet, for the first time, she felt the stirring of something, resembling guilt. She knew she couldn't stay in the Adeshola household forever, but the thought of leaving Kola behind filled her with dread. One evening, after a particularly intense conversation with Kola, Nkiru made a decision. She would stop the killing. She would leave behind her dark past and try to live a normal life. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope for a future that didn't involve death and destruction. But fate had other plans. Nkiru's past, however, had a way of catching up with her. What she didn't know was that back in Ajo, the village has grown restless. The whispers had grown louder, and the family she had once worked for had begun to connect the dots. A mysterious illness followed Nkiru wherever she went, and people began to talk openly about her being cursed, even possessing dark powers. The quiet maid who slipped through the cracks was now the main suspect in a string of tragic deaths. Madam Chioma, still grieving the death of her son Chike, had never quite recovered from the shock. After consulting with village elders and herbalists, she was finally convinced that her son's death had not been natural. Desperate for answers, she employed a private investigator, a former policeman named Mr. Debayo, to look into Nkiru's movements. Mr. Debayo was a sharp man, known for uncovering secrets hidden in plain sight. He was relentless in his search for the truth. Mr. Debayo's investigation led him to several households where Nkiru had worked, and the pattern became unmistakable. Every family she served experienced death or unexplained illness. He quietly gathered testimonies from surviving family members and village doctors, piecing together a chilling puzzle. With mounting evidence in hand, he began tracking Nkiru, determined to bring her to justice. Back in Adeshola's household, Nkiru remained unaware that her every step was being watched. Her feelings for Kola had only deepened, and she was torn between fleeing to escape her past or staying in the hope for a better future. But before she could make a decision, her world came crashing down. One fateful evening, as she served dinner to the Adeshola family, Mr. Debayo arrived at their doorstep with 2 policemen. The room fell silent as the men entered. Their presence ominous. Madam Adeshola, who had known Mr. Debayo from his days in the force, greeted him with confusion. "Mr. Debayo, what brings you here at this hour?" she asked, glancing nervously at the policeman behind him. "I'm afraid this is not a social visit, madam. I'm here on official business concerning your maid," he said, pointing directly at Nkiru. Nkiru's heart skipped a beat. She felt the walls closing in around her, her body frozen with fear. Kola, noticing her sudden change in attitude, looked at her with concern. "What's going on?" Kola asked, stepping forward to stand between Nkiru and Mr. Debayo. "Your maid Nkiru is under investigation for a series of murder," Mr. Debayo said calmly, pulling out a file filled with documents and testimonies. The room erupted in shock. Madam Adeshola panted, her heart flying to her chest, while Kola stared at Nkiru in disbelief. "That's not possible," Kola exclaimed. Nkiru had been nothing but kind and hardworking since the day she arrived. Mr. Debayo shook his head. "I understand this may come as a shock, but I have evidence. Nkiru has poisoned several families she worked for, leading to multiple deaths including children. The words hit Iniru like a punch to the gut. Her secret was out. There was no escaping now. She looked at Kola, her eyes pleading for understanding, but she saw only confusion and hurt on his face. Iniru, is this true? Kola asked, his voice barely a whisper. For the first time, Iniru felt vulnerable. The walls she had built around herself were crumbling, and all the bitterness and pain she had bottled up threatened to overwhelm her. She wanted to deny it, to lie her way out, but something inside her shifted. Perhaps it was the weight of guilt, or maybe it was her feelings for Kola. Either way, she found herself unable to speak. Answer him! Madam Adeshola shouted, her voice trembling with fury and fear. Iniru opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, tears filled her eyes, and she fell to her knee, shaking uncontrollably. It was the first time in years she had allowed herself to cry. Yes, she finally whispered, her voice breaking. It's true. I poisoned them. The room went silent. The revelation hung in the air like a dark cloud. Madam Adeshola staggered back, unable to comprehend the horror of what she had just heard. Kola stood motionless, staring at Iniru with disbelief and sorrow. Why? He asked. His voice was barely audible. Why would you do this? Iniru looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. I hated them. I hated them, she said, her voice cracking. I hated how they treated me, like I was nothing. I was invincible to them, just a maid. They had everything. Everything I never had. I couldn't stand it anymore. Kola shook his head, stepping back in shock. But not everyone was like that. Not me. Not my family. Iniru's sobs grew louder. I wanted to stop. I wanted to change, but it was too late. The policemen stepped forward and placed handcuffs on Iniru's wrist. They led her out of the house. She looked back one last time, her eyes locking with Kola's. His face was a mixture of sadness and anger, and she knew there was no going back. Iniru's arrest sent shockwaves through the village. Words of her crime quickly spread, and families who had lost loved ones to her poison were devastated. Many couldn't believe that the quiet, unassuming maid had been behind so much death and destruction. Mr. Adebayo's investigation was commended as a triumph of justice. But for the families of Iniru's victims, no amount of justice could bring back their children, their siblings, or their parents. Kola struggled to move on from the betrayal. He had believed in Iniru, had even felt something more for her. But now, all he felt was an overwhelming sense of loss. His family, shaken by the revelation, retreated to a new country to recover, as they just escaped a near-death experience. What if she had hurt them too? As for Iniru, she was sentenced to life in prison. Some of the villagers demanded the harshest punishment possible, death by hanging. But some, including Kola, wondered if her actions had been driven by more than just malice. Perhaps it was a lifetime of pain, of neglect, of feeling invincible that had pushed her to such extremes. But no matter the reason, the consequence of her choices was irreversible. In her prison cell, Iniru had plenty of time to reflect on her life. She thought of the families she had destroyed, the lives she had taken, and the feelings that had harbored for Kola. There was no escaping the guilt now, no running from the demons she had created. She was alone, as she had always been. But this time, there was no one else left to blame but herself. The housemaid who had poisoned every family she worked for would spend the rest of her life locked away, haunted by the ghost of her past and the lives she had stolen. The once beautiful girl from Ajo had become a symbol of tragedy, an evidence of the dangers of letting hatred and bitterness consume one's mind. In the quiet village of Ajo, where life eventually returned to normal, people would still whisper her name for years to come, telling the story of a maid who brought death to every family she entered. But in those whispers, there was also a lesson, a reminder that even the most unassuming among us can carry darkest of secrets. That unresolved bitterness, jealousy, and hatred can lead to destructive consequences, not only for others, but also for oneself. Iniru's inability to forgive the hardship and mistreatment she faced as a child drove her to take vengeance on innocent families, costing her freedom and peace of mind. This story teaches that harboring resentment and seeking vengeance only deepens one's pain and isolation. Instead, confronting and healing from past traumas is crucial to breaking the cycle of harm. And more importantly, we should really be careful when choosing domestic helps.